everyone, this is DKeys giving you an updated Staff Elementalist build guide following the June 2015 patch. This patch included an update to Lion's Arch, as well as a complete overhaul of the trait system into the specialization system. Now, instead of having only 7 points to put into 5 trait lines, you pick 3 trait lines and get to make a selection at each level in those lines. Also, the trait lines have been renamed as specializations. So, in Fire, at the Adept Minor level, we have Empowering Flame, which gives 150 power while in Fire Attunement. This is also currently bugged to give you 150 extra power, but I expect that to be fixed soon. Our first selection is Burning Precision, which grants your critical hits an increased chance to apply burning, and also increases the duration of that burning by a little bit. Next is Sunspot, which applies damage to nearby enemies when you attune to fire, and grants you a fire shield aura. Next, Pyromancer's Training is a 10% damage increase, which we're all familiar with, but also the recharge reduction has been rolled into this trait. So instead of being only 20% as before, it is now 33%, which means we will use Meteor Shower and Lava Font a whole lot more during battle. In fact, your Lava Font uptime will be a lot better than 100%. Burning Rage, the last minor in this tree, has not changed at all. It's a 10% damage modifier to burning foes. Finally, Persisting Flames has gotten buffed a little bit. Now, it still gives you 10 seconds of Fury when you use a Blast Finisher in any fire field, and it also increases all of your fire fields by 2 seconds, but also Lava Tomb, which was previously a Adept level major trait, has been rolled into this. So if you happen to get downed when there's a lot of trash around in a battle, you have a pretty good chance of getting up because you'll have a lava font around you while you're down. This lava font happens to last for about 10 seconds. In Air, the first minor has been buffed a little bit so that you see a 25% movement speed increase while attuned to air. This means when you're running between battles, you don't have to slot Signet of Air anymore, you can just attune to air. Ferocious Winds gives you 7% of your precision, including your base stats and your gear, as Ferocity, which is a nice little buff. And the next minor, Lightning Strike from Electric Discharge, really hasn't changed at all. You might see a little bit of use out of this because Glyph of Storms in Air Attunement is very useful for stacking Vuln and has become very prevalent in the meta for organized groups. Next, Tempest Defense really hasn't changed at all, but was moved down a tier so that you can pick it instead of having to use other traits there. And it is again a 20% damage increase to disabled foes. This has a very good synergy with the Disable from Frostbow. Weak Spot hasn't changed either, giving you a 60% chance to apply vulnerability on critical hits. This vulnerability has a 5% or a 5-second base duration. Finally, Bolt to the Heart at the Grandmaster level now is a 20% damage modifier to foes under 50% health. This is in line with the Necromancer and Thief traits that are pretty much the same thing. Now, other options for your air tree could be possibly one with air if you're doing a lot of running and need to move around very quickly, and especially Inscription, which will decrease the recharge on Glyph of Storms specifically. Finally, I would recommend Water for your last specialization. While the Soothing Mist and other minors are nice for a little bit more healing to maintain your Scholar's buff, it has a couple of really nice damage modifiers. For example, Piercing Shards increases your vulnerability duration that you get from Weak Spot, and also is a 20% damage modifier to foes with vulnerability on them while attuned to water. We can use this with your long-lasting AoEs, and especially Frostbow, to make the most use of this. Next, we have Aquamancer's Training, which reduces the cooldown on your water skills, which can be pretty nice, but also gives you a 10% damage modifier, while over 90% health, much like your Scholar's bonus. Finally, I would recommend Cleansing Water for your last specialization choice in many situations. This goes very well with Healing Rain, which applies regen multiple times so that you can cleanse lots of conditions from your party in tough spots. Though occasionally I would recommend Powerful Aura if you happen to need a quick reflect for your whole party, because you can use that Magnetic Aura so that any projectiles heading to your party are reflected back. But for staff, for the most part, I recommend Cleansing Water just for the extra Condi cleanse. This opens up more healing possibilities so that instead of taking Ether Renewal sometimes, you can stick with Arcane Brilliance for that last finisher and keep your damage and your might and your fury up a little bit more. For equipment, I would recommend a mix of Berserker's and Assassin's armor with a Berserker's weapon and Berserker's trinkets for the most part. Alternatively, if you already have Berserker's armor, you could use that with the Assassin's trinkets you get from dungeon collections to get the same balance between Berserkers and Assassins, or power and precision. For infusions, I would recommend Precise Infusions so that you could then move a little bit more towards the Berserker's armor and trinkets. Or if you still have power infusions, just try to keep that same balance. You want mostly Berserkers and about 70 precision towards the Assassin side for those mathematical types. For your runes, I would recommend Runes of the Scholar for maximum DPS, though if you don't have a Scholar set and can't afford it, Flame Legion is alright. And Strength is another option, though it's not very good anymore just because Staff Elementalist really is not responsible for stacking might. For staves, I would recommend a staff of the Ascended rarity with Night and Force for nighttime dungeons, as well as an Air and Force staff for daytime dungeons, and a specific Slaying Sigil and Force for any dungeons you happen to spend a lot of time in, for example, Ara. If you prefer stacking weapons, I would recommend Bloodlust, though you may be getting into problems with stat caps in the lower level dungeons. If you do like stacking sigils, make sure to put one on your underwater weapon so that if you happen to swim through a puddle, you don't lose those stacks. With this new build, a lot of your fire skills have much reduced cooldowns. For example, Lava Font has a 4-second cooldown now, so you'll have much higher than 100% uptime on that. Flame Burst doesn't really have much of a use anymore because it doesn't fit as nicely into the rotation as it had previously. And Burning Retreat, again, since you can't stack those AoEs, really isn't more useful than just another dodge that you can use in emergency situations. Meteor Shower has a 20-second cooldown, so you'll also use that a lot more often. In water, again, not a DPS attunement, you have Healing Rain, which is now on a 30-second cooldown, so you could use this on your party mates a lot more often than previously. And your other water skills have a reduced cooldown as well. In air, using Static Field with a blast finisher, and Windborne Speed when you're out of combat, just after you finish a battle specifically, could help your party stack a lot of swiftness so that you run between fights a lot more quickly. Gust can push back a foe, but also has a long cooldown, and also will put you in combat if you use it, so use it only as a last resort if you need to push a mob out of the way. It could be useful, though, as a way to set up a mob against a wall for a battle. Finally, in Earth Attunement, Eruption is a blast finisher, so it's very useful to use it at the start of a battle. Magnetic Aura will reflect projectiles in a small radius around you, so if you happen to have Aura Share, you can put this on all of your party mates for an emergency reflect. Unsteady Ground will block the progress of any enemies following you, making it useful in running, but it will also put you in combat. And similarly with Shockwave, you will immobilize an enemy for a short period of time, but put you in combat. For slot skills, I recommend Arcane Brilliance for the blast finisher, and the Good Heal as long as you're standing in melee range of your target. Though, if you happen to be in a difficult battle where Healing Rain won't be enough Kandi Cleanse for you, take Ether Renewal instead. Now, Ether Renewal does have a slightly longer cast time, but you shouldn't notice that in battle. For utility skills, I recommend Signet of Fire now, since you don't need Arcane Wave to maintain the Arcane Lightning buff, and this Signet of Fire passive will give you 180 precision, which is very important for keeping your crit rate up for good damage. Other slot skills should be Glyph of Storms, so that you can have access to Lightning Storm for insane vulnerability and very good damage on your target, and Conjure Frostbow for very good AoE damage on large targets, as well as a 5-second disable that can be used for opening up combat so that you can safely DPS and get off your Meteor Shower or get off an Ice Storm, Frost Fan, which was buffed, and even Frost Volley, which has been buffed to the point where if you can't get into Fire Attunement, it can be a very useful option for your DPS. For your elite, Conjure Fiery Greatsword can be another opener for battle, but also Glyph of Elementals has some uses, such as your Earth Elemental to grab aggro, or your Ice Elemental to grab aggro to a lesser extent, but also maintain chill and healing. Chill on your enemies and healing on you. Otherwise, Fire Elemental can be a little bit of a damage boost if you don't have any other options. On Fiery Greatsword, I would recommend using Firestorm as you're running into a battle. Then use Fiery Rush so that last hit hits your enemy now that it has finally been buffed. And then possibly a Fiery Whirl after that if you're not in danger of running out of combat using it. Then drop that so that you can start your General Staff Elementalist DPS rotation. For items, I would recommend for food a Truffle Steak for most of your fights, or a Candied Dragon Roll for more difficult fights. Both of these are a little bit, are about the same DPS increase. If you happen to be able to move around a lot, a salad may also be an option, though I would not necessarily recommend this with Frostbow and Staff because the Ice Storm on Frostbow and Meteor Shower will root you in place, so you don't see a very good uptime on the buff from this food. For very casual dungeons, I would recommend the food from the Birthday Blaster, which gives you 40 power, precision, ferocity, and condition damage, and also the same amount of toughness and power, or toughness and vitality. So while it's not as good as, say, Truffle Steak, it's still pretty competitive for a Staff Elementalist with its small amount of condition damage. For utility consumables, I'd recommend Slaying Potions of the appropriate type, and for fractals, if you don't have an appropriate Slaying Potion, probably just Scale Venom for the weakness and vulnerability. If you don't want to use Scale Venom, I would recommend Sharpening Stones for that additional power. Either Bountiful or Toxic is fine, or even Superior. Now that your toughness and vitality have been increased just a little bit, these are a little bit more useful than they were previously. Other items to keep around are some stealthing consumables, just in case you can't get out of combat at the end of a run, and any other utility items that you happen to pick up along your way. The main change to the Staff Elementalist rotation is that you'll use 3 fireballs instead of 4 between each lava font, and that meteor shower will be coming off cooldown more often. Flame Burst is no longer a DPS increase under any circumstances, and Burning Retreat is now only useful as a dodge because you can't stack those AoEs, and because those 3 fireballs fit neatly between each lava font. If you want to use Glyph of Storms and Frostbow for an opener, you'll want to make sure you get down a couple of lava fonts and a meteor shower before pulling out those hard-hitting skills. Then swap to Air Attunement for that Glyph of Storms, and then swap to Water while casting that Frostbow so that you can deep freeze if necessary, then use Frostbow skills 4, 3, and 2 only if your Fire Attunement is not off cooldown. Then you'll want to resume your rotation with Fire 1, 2, 5. That's it for Staff Elementalist for now. Thanks for watching, everyone.